Since time immemorial, humanity has woven stories on the threshold between reality and fiction, driven by a deep longing to find order in chaos, to believe that behind every improbable event there is an intention, a design. This is how urban legends are born, those narratives that expand like smoke, whose original fire may be just a spark of, "It would be interesting if it were real." There is talk of the Freemasons' plot on dollar bills, of the Philadelphia experiment, of Area 51, of Roswell, of the idea that no human has actually set foot on the moon. All of them share an unmistakable pattern. They are the reflection of an enthusiastic desire, the materialization of a rumor that has grown so much that it has transformed into something bigger, a legend. Because humans have always preferred the inevitable to the accidental. The idea that its existence, the result of astronomical probability, was actually a deliberate act. Imagining a reason behind the nonsense helps one endure the whims and cruel principles of the world. Thus, urban legends become the desire of someone who, recognizing the irrationality of the world, refuses to accept it and decides to make it more interesting. Among all those legends that light up the sky like stars, there was one that stood out for its strange verisimilitude in the midst of the incredible. It was the rumor about a legendary gamer known as Kuhaku, a name that unbeatably topped more than 280 online game rankings. It was said that he had completely defeated a grandmaster-level chess program, that his playing style was abnormal and his handwriting indecipherable, that he used tool assists or cheat codes. It was said, it was said, it was said. The most accepted hypothesis was that Kuhaku was a creation of the development companies to promote their games, a ghost player. But those who investigated came across a disconcerting truth. The account existed, and on every console, every SNS, every game, its record of wins and losses remained immaculate, without a single blemish. The mystery thickened. Was he a hacker who erased his defeats? An elite clan? The absolute silence of Kuhaku, who never communicated, fueled the fire. It was only known that he was Japanese. No one had seen his real face, and that lack of information was the perfect fuel for the urban legend to gain unstoppable momentum. But every urban legend, no matter how fascinating, hides an often disappointing truth, and that of Kuhaku was no exception. The reality behind the invincible player, the myth that dominated the digital world, was a spectacle of decadence and isolation. In a room of 16 tatami mats, crammed with 8 video game consoles, mountains of open games, cups of instant noodles, and bottles of mineral water, 2 figures languished in front of the pale glow of an LED screen. The curtains blocked the sunlight, and the air was stale. There, an 18-year-old boy, Sora, unemployed, a virgin, unpopular, unable to communicate, with unkempt black hair and a threadbare t-shirt, manipulated the mouse with his hands and feet. Beside him, a 10-year-old girl, Shiro, friendless, bullied, anthropophobic, with long white hair and red eyes that contrasted radically with her brother's, was slurping noodles in the middle of a battle. It was 8 at night, or perhaps in the morning, on the 4th day without sleep. I'm dying. I've really died. Hey, my little sister, hurry up. Res, way! Sora pleaded, while Shiro, with inhuman calm, responded, Zuzu, it's impossible to use my feet to control the mouse. That was Kuhaku's true identity, the union of their names, Sora and Shiro, 2 hikikomori NEETs who had made a closed room their only world. If the world knew this truth, they would prefer to continue embracing the illusion of the urban legend. The conversation between the brothers, peppered with sarcasm and absolute mutual dependence, revealed their dynamic. Nee, aren't you going to look for a job? Shiro asked. Then why don't you go to school too, my little sister? Sora replied. A complicit silence sealed the issue. It wasn't just that they didn't have a girlfriend or friends. They literally had no one. Society had spit them out. Shiro, with an intelligence so superior that no one his age could understand it, was the perfect target for bullying. Sora, always smiling and always failing, was scolded by parents and teachers alike. Talking too much excluded them. Remaining silent made them a target. Understanding people's real intentions was another form of marginalization. The real world was, for them, a shitty game without clear objectives, without fair rules, where those who have more receive a penalty and those who have less also. A stupid game for masochists with 7 billion willing players. In that state of extreme exhaustion, after 5 sleepless days, a sound broke the monotony. Ring. An email arrived to one of the 30 synced accounts on the tablet PC they used to play. Oosh. Ni. An email, muttered Shiro. Sora, in the full apotheosis of multitasking managing 4 characters on 4 screens, growled, "What are you asking your brother? You still want something from me, but I really don't have any extra strength left." He assumed it was advertising, but Shiro, with his prodigious memory, located the message in the 3rd address of the main account. The subject was disturbingly precise. For you two. Sora, who had just won a solo crusade, tensed. The content was even stranger. Have you ever felt that you were born in the wrong world? A question that pierced them like a dagger. The email included a URL without the .jp domain, a link to a page that appeared to host a game. Shiro, disinterested, returned to her console pillow, leaving the decision to her brother. So your plan is to make me take the risk, huh? Well, if this turns out to be just a hoax in the end, let's take it as another hobby, Sora said, and with the security software in overdrive, he clicked. What appeared was a simple online chessboard. Sora began to play, but upon seeing the opponent's response, a chill ran down his spine. Wait! This is a challenge for Kuhaku. If the other team has an advanced chess program, I won't be enough to win, he exclaimed, trying to stop Shiro, who was already falling asleep. She yawned. Who plays chess well these days? It was true. Had defeated the strongest program in the world 20 consecutive times. But then, after a few movements, Shiro's eyes snapped open. Something about the flow of the game alerted her. Ni. Change of players, he said, and Sora, without question, gave him the seat. Shiro had recognized a worthy opponent. Chess is a zero-sum game with limited decisions, where theory dictates a perfect hand. Shiro could predict a colossal number of moves, but this opponent was different. It can't be, she whispered, surprised. Sora calmed her. Calm down. I'm sure the other team is human. He explained that a program always chooses the best move, which makes it predictable. But this opponent was setting traps, provoking, showing emotions. The other team tricks you into making a bad play. And if you feel like it's natural for a program to do that, then you're wrong. The battle lasted for more than 6 hours. Adrenaline and dopamine erased the fatigue of 5 days without sleep. Time dilated. Every second was an eternity of calculation and counter-calculation. Shiro, with his pure logic, executed the movements, while Sora, with his exceptional ability to read human reasoning, pointed out each provocation, each emotional tactic of the rival. Calm down. If the opponent is not a program, all the more reason there is no way for you to lose. Don't fall for their provocations. I will point out each of his provocations and tactics so that you can defeat him. That symbiosis, that fusion of their disparate abilities, was the true reason for their legend. Finally, the decisive moment arrived. An emotionless voice from the speakers declared, "Checkmate. Victory for the brothers." After a long silence, they both exhaled deeply, as if they had forgotten to breathe, and laughed. Unbelievable. It's been a while since I've played a game as difficult as this, Shiro said. Sora, elated, added, "Ha! That was the first time I saw that you had difficult moments with such a simple game, right?" They were speculating about the identity of the rival, a possible grandmaster, a human monster, when the ring sound of the mail interrupted them again. Shiro opened the message, waiting for a response from the opponent. But the content was a single sentence that fell on them like a jug of ice water. Well done. With that kind of ability, I'm sure they find it difficult to live. The euphoria evaporated instantly. Dead silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the fans. Those words stripped them naked, returned them to their reality of being marginalized in a room with 6 tatami mats, isolated from the world. Unpleasant memories surfaced. The death of their parents, the closing of their hearts, the absolute incomprehension of a society that punished them for being different. Shiro hung his head, and Sora angrily typed out a furious response. "None of your business. Who the hell are you anyway?" The retort was almost instantaneous, a new question that ignored his anger. "What do you think of this world? Is it interesting? Is it a place where they can feel calm?" The brothers exchanged a look. They didn't need words. The answer was the same as always. It's a shitty game. A game without fair rules, where keeping silent makes you a target and speaking excludes you, where intelligence is a liability. Damn! Sora gritted his teeth as he stroked Shiro's head. The godlike atmosphere of the game had faded, leaving only 2 frail and depressed humans. Sora, with his cursor over the shutdown button, was about to tune out everything when a new ring stopped him. Shiro held his hand. The message said, "What if a world where everything was decided by a simple game existed?" Sora froze. The text continued. "A world where the objectives and rules are clear. A world at the top of the video game list. What do you think?" The brothers looked at each other, and a knowing smile, loaded with bitter irony, curved their lips. They nodded. Sora typed the answer that was his deepest truth. If that kind of world really existed, then that would mean that we were born in the wrong world. The moment he sent the response, the impossible happened. A faint sound, "Sha," erupted from the screen, followed by a crack like a short circuit. The room creaked. Crackles of electrical discharge filled the air, and a thunderous static noise, like that of a television with no signal, emanated from everywhere. Sora panicked, looking around frantically, while Shiro watched dumbfounded. From the speakers, no, from the screen itself, a voice emerged. "I also believe the same." "You two were born in the wrong world." A pair of ghostly white hands emerged from the surface of the screen. "What?" Sora shouted. "He!" Shiro screeched. The hands grabbed them by the waist and pulled them toward the screen with irresistible force. The voice resounded for the last time. "Brothers, I will let you be reborn in the world where you should have been born." A blinding white light flooded everything, and they closed their eyes tightly. When Sora opened them again, the first thing he felt was a warmth and luminosity that almost burned his retinas. It had been so long since he last felt the real sun. But the confusion lasted a breath. As he focused his sight, he realized that he was not on the ground, but high in the sky, in free fall. "Whoa," was all he could articulate. The scene was crazy. Islands floating in a vast blue sky, a dragon flying nearby, and on the horizon, next to some mountains, chess pieces of such colossal size that they distorted the perception of distance. "What the hell is this?" Sora shouted, realizing in 3 seconds that they were skydiving without a parachute. Beside him, Shiro, who had understood the situation instantly, hugged him, crying. But they were not alone. A boy fell next to them, with his arms open and a radiant smile. "Welcome to my world," he exclaimed with a voice that resonated despite the wind. "This is the utopia you've dreamed of, the world at the top of the video game chart. Disboard. Everything here is decided by a game, even our lives and the borders of this country." It took Sora 10 seconds to process those words. Shiro, clinging to her brother, murmured her question. "Who are you?" The boy, with a carefree gesture, pointed towards the gigantic chess pieces on the horizon. Yo? About me. I live there. In your world, you would call me God, right? He put a finger to his cheek, speaking with a tenderness and kindness that belied the terrifying situation. But Sora wasn't into theologies. This is not the time for that. We are falling to the ground at an enormous speed. Whoa! Shiro! In a reflex action, he twisted his body in the air to get under his sister, hugging her to protect her with his own body from the inevitable impact. Shiro let out an inaudible scream. The self-proclaimed god, observing the scene, spoke to them in a happy and confident tone. I hope to see you again. Yes, without a doubt. It will not be for a long time. And then the world went black. The feeling of solid ground. The aroma of grass. Ooh. Ooh. Sora groaned as he regained consciousness. What a strange dream, Shiro murmured, waking up shortly after. Sora thought about warning him not to raise the "it's not a dream" flag, but he restrained himself. He sat up, feeling the real grass under his feet, and when he looked up, the blue sky dazzled him. He took 2 staggering steps and realized he was on the edge of a cliff. "Wah!" he shouted, backing away. With his heart in his throat, he looked at the panorama that stretched out before him. It was the same incredible landscape he had seen as he fell. The floating islands, the dragons, the chess pieces the size of mountains silhouetted against the horizon. It wasn't a dream. It was the most absolute and terrifying confirmation. Hey, my little sister, Sora said, his voice shaking. Shiro responded, his eyes wide. Contemplating that fantasy landscape, Sora expressed what they both felt, with their voices in perfect harmony. I always thought that life was an impossible game, a game that was made for masochists. So the bug was finally fixed, huh? Enough. What the hell is this super horrible, shitty game? The irony was supreme. They had wanted a game world, and fate, or a boring god, had granted it in the most literal and terrifying way possible. Unable to process the magnitude of what had happened, exhaustion and shock overcame them, and they both lost consciousness once again, collapsing on the grass of an unknown world. Thus, the story folds in on itself, and the narrative becomes the seed of a new urban legend, one that you may one day hear. It is the rumor about an email that reaches the person who is said to be the best gamer in the world. A short, mysterious message with a URL. When you click, a game starts. And once that someone finishes the game, they disappear from this world, invited to a parallel universe. Would you believe her? That kind of urban legend, born of a longing for a more interesting world, now had Sora and Shiro as its first and reluctant protagonists, torn from their self-imposed prison to be thrown onto a cosmic-scale game board, where the rules were yet to be discovered, and the stake was their very existence. In the distant past, the ancient deus waged an endless war to become the one supreme god. This conflict, involving his servants and the creatures they created, plunged the world into an era of blood and agony. Races such as elves, dragons, and war beasts hated and slaughtered each other. Humans, an insignificant existence, struggled only to survive. The war, which seemed eternal, ended suddenly when the deists themselves, exhausted, abandoned the fight. The throne was taken by a deus who had stood by all this time, watching. Addressing the races that inhabited the devastated land, he questioned them. What is the difference between you and the beasts without intelligence? Accepting no answer, this deus, called Tet, declared an oath that became an absolute law. From this piece of heaven, I order that there be no looting or slaughter. The war disappeared, but conflicts persisted. To resolve them, Tet decreed that the 16 races that claimed to be intelligent must demonstrate it by building towers of wisdom and competing in games. Thus, the 10 oaths were born, and all disputes were resolved through games. In the present, on the continent of Andalusia, lies the kingdom of Elchea, a small and vulnerable country that is the last kingdom of the human species. In a tavern in the capital, two girls play poker in front of a group of spectators. One is Stephanie Dora, a blood relative of the late king, red-haired and about 16 years old, whose anxiety and poor dissimulation cause her to lose her completely. His opponent is an expressionless black-haired girl, dressed in a black veil, who maintains a calm demeanor. Outside the tavern, at an outdoor table, a hooded young woman watches the commotion and asks what's going on. A bearded, middle-aged man with whom he plays poker explains that a gambling tournament is being held to elect the next king of Elchea, just as the last words of the previous monarch were. The next king will not inherit the throne due to blood relationship. He must be crowned the best better of humanity. The man adds that, after having lost everything in bets for the country, there is no time left to appear decent. Any human can participate, and the last one standing will become king, with no rules other than respecting the 10 oaths. The girl in the hood's companion, a young man also hooded, shows great interest in the situation. After observing the inner game, they both conclude in a whisper that Stephanie suffers a total defeat. The young man then takes out a square object from his pocket, manipulates it, and sounds a kacha. His own game with the bearded man continues. Convinced of his victory, he shows a full house, but the young man casually reveals a royal flush. The man, furious, accuses him of cheating due to the incredible odds of that hand. The young man, with a small smile, reminds him of Article 6 of the 10 Oaths. According to the oath, the bet will be added unconditionally and demands the stake. Reluctantly, the man complies, handing over his wallet. As the young man and the girl leave, a friend approaches the man and asks him what he had bet to risk all his money for survival expenses. The bearded man nonchalantly replies that the young men had bet, "Feel free to do whatever you want with us," a bet that was equivalent to their lives and chastity. His friend is surprised by the audacity of the hooded men and comments on the cleverness of obtaining a royal flush so blatantly. Already on the street, the girl in the hood says to the young man, "Nee, how clever." He admits his ruse, muttering, "Article 8. Once cheating has been discovered during a game, it will be considered a loss," and adds, "That means that as long as you don't get caught, you can do it." It's great to be rewarded. Recognizing that it was a little experiment, he stretches and comments, "Well, we made some money in the end." When his sister asks him if he understands how money works there, he confidently responds, "It's impossible to know, right? But leave it to me. This is your brother's field of expertise." With a tone that betrayed a disturbing security, both enter the tavern and inn building. Despite the bustle in the tavern, two hooded figures approach the counter. The young man took out his wallet and, after counting the coins, calmly asked how many nights they could pay for. The man behind the counter, with the air of a boss, hesitated for a moment before answering, 1 day and 3 meals. The young man laughed, pointing out his obvious exhaustion after 5 nights of traveling and accusing him of lying because of his tone of voice and look. After a tense haggling, where the young man revealed that he knew that the man was not the true owner of the inn, a 4-day stay with meals included was finally agreed upon. Upon receiving the keys, the young man identified himself as Kuhaku. Noticing his younger sister, Shiro, staring at the central table's departure with anguish, Sora reminded her that they had found accommodation. She, with a worried expression, declared that the player, a black-haired girl, was going to lose. Sora then realized that he was referring to his opponent's incredibly cunning traps, admitting that he would not like to face someone like that. Shiro asked him if he could still defeat her, but Sora evaded the question, rambling about how unreal that fantasy world seemed to them. Shiro apologized for asking such an obvious question, remembering that for them, defeat was almost impossible. Heading to his room, Sora paused for a moment next to the red-haired player, Steph, and whispered, "Can't you see that you're being tricked?" causing her to look surprised before continuing on his way. The room was simple and stark, with rough wooden furniture that creaked with every step. After closing the door, they removed their hoods, revealing their faces and modern clothes. Sora in jeans and a t-shirt, and Shiro in a sailor uniform and messy white hair. Sora plopped down on the only bed, relieved, and checked assignments on his phone. They confirmed that the objective of securing accommodation had been met, which unleashed a torrent of accumulated complaints due to the exhaustion of 5 sleepless nights and a strenuous walk. Sora complained about how impossible it all had been, especially for a hikikomori like him, while Shiro, staggering from fatigue, fell onto the bed. Despite her intelligence, she was an 11-year-old girl, and the physical and mental effort had left her exhausted. Sora praised her for her stamina, patting her head affectionately. He reflected on how lucky they were not to be attacked by thieves as they wandered lost in this new world. A thought that led them to remember how they'd gotten there a few hours earlier after being thrown into that unknown place. Waking up for the second time and cursing in his heart how unreasonable life was, an exhausted Sora turned to the passing pedestrians. Once Shiro temporarily regained his calm, both of them, although tired, managed to compose themselves. Stepping away from the edge of the cliff, they dropped onto the unpaved road. Shiro asked why they had come to that place, to which Sora replied that, in an RPG, this would be called a street, a place of passage. They decided to take an inventory of their possessions. From their pockets, they took out their respective smartphones, 2 portable game consoles, 2 multi-purpose batteries, 2 solar energy chargers, and a tablet PC that Shiro carried with him. It was expensive and unusual equipment for castaways, but for them, accustomed to playing in any place and situation, they were essential items. Sora found that, although electric waves did not work in that fantasy world, the phone could be used as a flashlight, camera, or compass. He ordered Shiro to turn off his devices and use the solar charger to conserve energy, as he had downloaded a virtual book on games that could serve as a survival guide. Shiro obeyed, trusting his brother's judgment from experience. Using the phone's compass, they determined a direction, but their situation was still that of being lost without a map. As they lay on the side of the road, Sora saw a group of people approaching. "Fantastic! My experience in RPGs really helped," he exclaimed. But Shiro cautiously pointed out that they looked strange. The group quickened their pace and surrounded them. They were dressed in green and boots and had the look of a typical bad boy band. "Wow, they're thieves," Sora complained, protecting Shiro with his body while cursing his luck that his first encounter was with criminals. However, what one of the thieves said left them perplexed. "Heh! If they want to pass, they have to play a game with us." This statement made the brothers look at each other in disbelief before remembering the words of that deity. This was a world where everything was decided with games. They compared these thieves to those from their world and couldn't help but smile, finally bursting into laughter at the absurdity and kindness of the scene compared to a real assault. The thieves, confused by his reaction, insisted, "What are you laughing at? If you don't play with us, don't even think about moving on from here." The brothers communicated with each other in low voices. "A person makes fun of others, so let's use traps to block their escape routes. What do you think?" Sora proposed. "It's okay," Shiro agreed. Then Sora clapped his hands and declared, "Okay, let's duel." But unfortunately for us, we have no money. When the thief was going to propose another bet, Sora interrupted him. "If we lose, we will be at their disposal, no matter if they decide to sell us or what they do to us." Surprised, the thief hesitated before Sora continued. "On the other hand, if we win, they will take us to the nearest town, pap, and give us the robes those 2 are wearing. Since we are wearing these flashy clothes due to the world transfer, we must have them. And also, about the rules of the game of this world. Tell me all of them honestly, Sly." Confident in his victory, Sora made use of his adaptive gaming mind and added additional demands. Later, Sora murmured while remembering that moment. "The 10 oaths. Shiro, do you remember them?" "Yeah, rules. Very interesting," replied Shiro, who looked like he was about to fall asleep. They had learned the rules of that world of thieves, which were no longer even recognizable after their defeat. Sora took out his phone, where he had transcribed the rules, and reread them out loud. The Pinowos were the absolute rules established by God. 1. All killing, war, and plunder are prohibited in the world. 1. All disputes will be resolved by the result of a game. Study. In games, bets will be placed depending on what both sides consider to be of equal value. The third, unless it conflicts with the third oath, the content of the game and the things bet will not matter. 5. The challenged team has the right to decide the contents of the game. Latter 6. According to the oath, the bet will be added unconditionally. 7. Everything regarding group conflicts will be decided by a representative. Once cheating has been discovered during a game, it will be considered a loss. 9 key. All the above rules are unconditionally eternal, upheld in the name of God. 1. Everyone should get along while playing the games. Sora reflected on them. The 9th is made to protect the previous ones, but the 10th? It was not a mandatory requirement to get along with the opponent, but rather an irony that said, anyway, it's not like you guys are living in harmony. The joyful face of that god arose in his mind. That boy who dragged us into this world, if that person really is God, then he actually has a good character, Sora said with a wry smile as he put away the phone. Suddenly, the fatigue of 5 sleepless nights completely overwhelmed him, and his consciousness began to cloud. If I think about it, of course it is a natural reaction, he muttered. At his side, Shiro, who always thought about being next to him, clung to his waist and fell into a deep sleep. Sora brushed her bangs away from her face, revealing her porcelain-white skin and a face as beautiful as a piece of art, so refined as a doll's that it made saying they were brothers sound like a bad joke. Don't I always tell you to at least cover yourself with a blanket? You will catch a cold, he told her. Yes, she replied with a weak voice, asking him to help her. Sora covered her with a blanket that smelled of dust, thinking it was better than nothing. Looking at Shiro's sleeping face and steady breathing, Sora fell into thought. So, from now on, where should we start? He fumbled with his phone, looking for some software that could help them in their predicament. This is a fantasy about being dragged to another world, so the first thing you should check is if there is a method to return. He thought of his parents, who were no longer in this world, of his sister, who was not accepted by society, of himself, who was not accepted by society, and of the surprise that lay behind the screen, this new world. Hey, Shiro, that thing about the protagonists of an alternate world, why didn't you want to return to that kind of world? He asked quietly, knowing that she was already asleep and wouldn't receive an answer. He tried to improvise a plan for the next few days, but before he could conclude his musings, the sleep demon cut off his thoughts completely. The sound of polite knocking on the door woke Sora, whose senses had been heightened by being in an unknown place. He ordered his urges to continue sleeping to be silent and activated his brain. On the other hand, his little sister, Shiro, was still fast asleep, with saliva on her face and clinging to her brother's left arm with a very comfortable expression. Sora wryly reflected that, in this world where murder and looting were forbidden, there was no need to guard, and that his sister's mental flexibility to adapt far exceeded his own. After the new blows, Sora asked who it was from inside. A female voice identified herself as Stephanie Dola, saying she had something to ask about the day's events. Sora, remembering her from a photo on his phone of a noble girl with red hair and blue eyes, agreed to open it. First, he had to convince a half-asleep Shiro to let go of his arm. When he opened the door, he found not the girl in the photo, but a Stephanie who seemed to have received a big blow, and asked him to come in. Once inside, Sora sat in a chair while Shiro, still sleepy, moved around on the bed. Stephanie, not paying attention to Sora's clumsy explanation of their sibling relationship, got straight to the point in a weak voice. What exactly happened? She wanted to know about the time when Sora brushing her shoulders that day, had said, "Can't you see that you're being tricked?" Shiro, muttering in her sleep, was the first to respond. "So you really lost?" This direct question agitated Stephanie, who exploded with fury, loudly admitting that she had indeed lost and that it was all over for her, eliminated from the competition for the throne. Sora, with a headache from lack of sleep, begged her not to shout so loudly, but she continued even sharper, crying and accusing him. "Since you knew the opponent was cheating, wouldn't it have been good for me if you had explained the cheating to the others? I could have won if you had exposed the truth." Sora, remembering what he had read before sleeping, coldly reminded him of the 8th of the 10 oaths. Once cheating has been discovered during a game, it will be considered a defeat. He explained to her that you only win if you clearly discover and prove the trap, and since she didn't realize it, the trickster was not defeated. Shiro, babbling sleepily, then hit the nail on the head. "So you lost, and you're in denial. And you came here to vent?" This blunt comment caused Stephanie's blood pressure to rise and her teeth to grind. Sora gently reprimanded his sister. "My little sister, could you please not pour oil on the fire while you pretend to sleep?" Revealing that he knew she was awake ever since he had mentioned looking for a girlfriend. It was then that a sudden idea arose in Sora's mind. Noticing this, Shiro fell silent. Sora, completely changing his previous attitude, adopted a sarcastic and deliberately vulgar smile. He began to look at Stephanie's body up and down, with a gaze that seemed to lick her voluminous figure, and selected words calculated to annoy. Not being able to see through a trap of such a level, and suddenly coming here to throw a tantrum, you even get angry at a girl for hitting the nail on the head. You are really a simpleton. And if you really are of that foolish old king's bloodline, then I suppose failing must come naturally to you. Sora looked at Stephanie with eyes full of pity, reserved for organisms extremely lacking in intelligence. She, trembling and with a burning, deadly look, demanded that he recant for having made a fool of her beloved grandfather. Sora scoffed, waving her hands, and explained that the reason she didn't notice the trap was because she was too defensive and conservative, unable to control her emotions or pay attention to her opponent's actions. "In my humble opinion, that is simply out of character for a gamer," he declared. To resolve their dispute, Sora proposed a game, an altered version of rock, paper, scissors. He announced that he would only use paper, and that if he took out anything else, he would automatically lose. "If I drew something other than paper, then I would lose. But if I defeat you with something other than paper, you also lose, bringing us to a tie." Stephanie, bewildered and alert, listened to the bets. Sora promised that if she won, he would agree to any request of hers, from revealing the truth of the trap to dying for her insult to the king. In exchange, if he won, Stephanie would have to agree to all of his demands. "We are betting our destinies here, so it's not a problem for you to bet your chastity, right?" When Stephanie asked for a tie, Sora offered to give her a small hint about the trap as a consideration. Then, in an apparently restless manner, he complained about their lack of food and lodging, superficially suggesting that they needed a place to stay. Stephanie assumed that was his request. Although it was a blatant provocation, Stephanie accepted the challenge, swearing by the 10 oaths with an acciente, to which Sora responded with a lewd acciente. In her mind, Stephanie began to furiously analyze Sora's strategy. He estimated his chances of winning at 2-1 if he chose rock or scissors, and deduced that Sora's real goal was to force a tie to get the accommodation. Believing he had seen through his plan, he decided that he would not allow him to tie. She was sure Sora expected her to choose scissors, so he would choose stone to win and make fun of her. To avoid this and defeat her only chance of victory, Stephanie decided to choose paper, guaranteeing her own victory or, at the very least, a draw that she controlled. Confident, she agreed to start. At the count, Stephanie threw scissors, but to her absolute horror, Sora threw rock. "Why?" "This way," she stammered, completely defeated. Sora coldly explained to her that his initial provocation was to make her believe that the stone was her only way to lose, and then his calm expression led her to think that the paper was her winning trick. So far, everything was going well. But choosing paper would make me lose. This way, not only would you beat my only chance of victory, but you could also double your chance of winning against me. Everything from his calming process to his final winning idea had been predicted and manipulated by him. Stephanie, humiliated and with her lips bitten, knelt on the ground, admitting defeat and offering the accommodation she believed was the bet. But Sora corrected her with a smile. Well, about that. You're wrong, you know. He reminded her that he never specifically confirmed that his request was for accommodation. He had only complained about his situation and then smiled. He had only begged superficially, without specifying the terms. It seems you understand. Then listen carefully to my perfunctory request, Sora said. Suddenly, he pointed his finger at Stephanie and declared his true demand. Fall in love with me. A long silence filled the room. Shiro was the first to break the awkwardness, innocently watching her brother from the side. So? Hey, what's wrong, my little sister? Was my plan so perfect that it left you speechless? Although he didn't understand his sister well, Sora felt intoxicated by her perfect command. According to the sixth oath, the bet would be added unconditionally. Not even free will could stop him. But Shiro just looked confused. What is happening? Seeing his sister's bewildered expression, Sora also felt lost. Isn't there a saying that says, love is blind? If it is in complete accordance with the oaths, then of course she would have to devote herself completely to me. Accommodation, money, even talent. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Shiro murmured softly, become my property. Wouldn't that have been enough? This way, you would have everything. Sora was silent for a moment, processing. If he had used those words, everything that belonged to Steph would become his. It was a much more favorable option. Why didn't I think of that? Ni, was your own wish mixed in the order? Sora screamed and put his hands on his head, realizing his mistake. I really turned out to be like that. Did the superficial feeling of not having a girlfriend cloud my judgment? It just can't be! Shiro looked at him coldly, disapprovingly. You said that you didn't need a girlfriend. As long as Shiro was here, that would be enough. That was me talking too much. Very sorry. Sora knelt before his sister and apologized profusely, but she remained cold. Meanwhile, Stephanie, who had been asked to fall in love, was lying on her side, shaking, her cheeks burning and her heart racing. Although it was an effect of the oaths, he felt something genuine, and also jealousy. How can I admit this? He suddenly shouted, making Sora jump. What kind of superficial request was that? How dare you play with a maiden's heart? Sora, embarrassed, tried to defend himself. The definition of superficial depends on the person. You wanted a taste of the dessert, but that taste was the entire dessert. Isn't that a fraud? Shiro intervened calmly, quoting the oaths. Third, in games, bets will be placed depending on what both sides consider to be of equal value. Fourth, unless it conflicts with the third party, the content of the game and the stake will not matter. Sora nodded, regaining confidence. Exact. When the bet was decided, the game had already begun. You had the right to refuse or change the conditions, but you didn't. The one who wasted those rights was you. Stephanie fell to her knees, banging her forehead against the ground in frustration. Do you think I'm fine? Not entirely. But I won the bet, so can I ask for something? Steph remembered that although she should love him, she had no obligation to obey him. He decided that he would reject any request with a firm no. All right. First, since Stephanie is very long, can I call you Steph? Oh, okay. He responded immediately, blushing. Names don't matter. But after that, I won't accept anything else. Without realizing it, he had already agreed to the first request. Sora continued. It would be great if you called me Sora. Steph, you're of royal lineage, right? Your house should be spacious. Can we stay with you for a while? Ah, okay. No problem. Eh? Eh? Because? Steph fell into confusion, but her face burned. She had just agreed to live with him. It's not good. This is not what I meant. Sora, somewhat pale, asked, "Is it okay then?" As if I were. Everything is useless now. Steph gave a hollow, defeated laugh. Sora had made a mistake by not including a contractual obligation. But love, although imposed, was already taking effect. Steph, in the midst of her first love, couldn't think clearly. Historically, love had been the cause of ruin for entire nations, and now she understood it very well. Steph, completely defeated and tearful, lay on the wooden floor. She had given up all resistance and declared herself willing to do whatever Sora wanted, regardless of the consequences. She had missed something crucial in her reflections. Since she never expected him to ask her to fall in love with him, she simply gave in to his requests. Sora exchanged a glance with Shiro, who nodded silently, and then, with a deadpan expression, said to his brother, "Waiting for Shiro to be 18 years old. Ni is very pitiful." Sora defended himself, stating that even then he couldn't do anything to his little sister. Shiro then congratulated him sarcastically. "Ni, congratulations for your graduation of virginity." This made Steph, who had abandoned all will, suddenly regain the courage to resist. The reason, however, was not the fear of losing her virginity, but a strange expectation, something that she herself desired, which embarrassed her to the point of wanting to bang her head against the wall. Sora, completely ignoring his subtle thoughts, stated plainly, "No, until Shiro is 18, all things are 18, and related are prohibited." Steph murmured her surprise, but Shiro assured her not to worry about her. Sora insisted that he would not allow a girl to watch pornographic scenes. Shiro, aware of her brother's preferences for game boxes and the material he left around his room, questioned him about why he had then asked Steph to fall in love with him if he was bad at rape. Steph was stunned by the conversation. That's when Steph pointed out the obvious. Wouldn't it be okay if you left your sister out of the room?" Sora responded that while he was glad Steph wanted it, it couldn't be done due to complicated circumstances, causing a blushing Steph to call him stupid and an idiot. Ignoring her, Sora and Shiro, like two students solving a complex problem, meditated with their arms crossed until Shiro's face lit up. "So," he said, proposing a solution. Then, barely safe for work, take action. Sora praised her for her talent, although Shiro didn't fully understand it. They had found a method that accomplished the objective while keeping the younger sister present, which put Steph on alert. Shiro asked what degree or type of terrain Sora was. He admitted that, being a virgin, he didn't know what to do. Shiro then held up his smartphone and announced that he would give instructions while filming it. To Sora's question about why the video camera was necessary, Shiro deadpanned, "Ni, don't you want masturbation material?" He, with mixed feelings, gratefully accepted. Shiro gave the first instruction. "First take, start, falling, suddenly." Sora looked for something to trip over, but Shiro gently kicked him, causing him to fall on Steph, and with a lackluster performance, his hands ended up pressing on Steph's breasts. For Steph, the word that described this corrupt and vulgar development was violent. Shiro gave the second instruction. Second, take by force majeure. He groped them. Sora objected that if it was accidental, it wouldn't be force majeure, but Shiro asked him if he gave up. He decided to work hard. He began groping and shaking Steph's breasts repeatedly. The spongy feeling left Sora speechless, only able to exclaim, "Wah!" Steph, for her part, opened her eyes and then relaxed, feeling like she was melting under his touch, and a sound escaped her mouth that fortunately went unheard. Sora, excited about the 3D experience, asked if it still counted as all ages. Shiro, frowning slightly as he looked at his own flat chest, confirmed that it was. Shiro's third instruction was, "Third, here. From here, uncover her nipples." Sora asked again if it was still safe for work. Shiro solemnly said that by a certain magazine's standards, even being completely naked didn't matter, but Sora objected. Shiro suggested that the video would be cut and edited, to which Sora replied that this was live and could not be censored. Shiro then proposed doing it in her underwear, but Sora said that it was difficult to undress her in that situation. Shiro then suggested, "Knee, not above. Do it below." Sora praised the idea of lifting the skirt, even though it would cause a slight block. Just as Sora reached out to lift Steph's skirt, her melted brain revived. His instincts warned him that downstairs is not good. Driven by the instinct that her status in life would change if the inevitable happened, Steph shouted, "Yeah! Yeah, ha!" and suddenly slapped Sora's hand, hitting him. Sora, who was on his knees, lost his balance. Although he tried to avoid it, he backed towards the door, hit a bump in the wall with his head, and, after a dong, the cheap door burst open and he fell into the hallway. The door then closed silently. Steph stood still, not understanding what had happened. Realizing that she had hit Sora and that he had flown into the hallway, she panicked and screamed his name for the first time, feeling her heart being snatched away with worry. He hurried to open the door and found Sora in the corner of the hallway, shaking and pressing his head against his knees. He didn't seem hurt by the impact, but terrified, and knelt down to continually apologize. I'm sorry. I thought I'd never get another chance to touch breasts. I'm a man, after all. I wanted at least a girlfriend. I was entertaining myself. I don't know. Please don't look at me that way. Yes, I'm scum. Yes, I'm a pervert. I know. I'm sorry. Confused, Steph returned to the room in search of Shiro and found her sitting on the bed, exactly like her brother. Large tears rolled down her expressionless and trembling face as she murmured, Nee, where are you? No, leave Shiro alone." Steph was stunned, having completely forgotten about the groping of her breast. Thus the truth behind the urban legend of Kuhaku was revealed. Sora and Shiro are a single gamer, but once separated, Sora becomes an atropophobic NEET incapable of communicating properly, and Shiro becomes an incurable hikikomori hikikaxi. These siblings, with a 7-year age difference, can only be together in one place, their home.